who has inadvertently or unknowingly, I should say, I guess you could say either one. I don't know if inadvertently, probably unknowingly, impregnates his own daughter-in-law. Now, if you told people that, and said, tonight we're reading the story about a man who gets his daughter-in-law pregnant, you'd probably think we're watching a really bad soap opera or something that you wouldn't want your kids to watch on TV, a Netflix show or something. If you tell people you're reading the Bible, they go, come on. There we go. Thank you, Mike. If you're gonna put on any
no more masks.
I want really cool sunglasses. Anyways, so we want to thank people who are jumping. There's people that are joining us online right now. They're on Facebook, right? There's the cool sunglasses. Now I look like I'm in the return from Mexico. But yeah, thank you for everybody who's joining us and the lesson tonight. I was going to get on and tease everybody with what we're reading about tonight, and then I thought better about it because I don't even think I can. I honestly think that if I said it on Facebook, if there were kids that were listening, I would have been embarrassed, because it really is a story that most people don't know is in the Bible. It definitely is classified in those stories that, and I put it up here for everyone who's here to see. It's classified as those stories that they don't teach you about in religious school. It's also one that the rabbis don't comment on too much either, because there's no, as we're going to see, it's very hard to spin this in any way that doesn't make the people involved in it look pretty creepy. So they don't really know what to do with it. It's not that they ignore it. You can't ignore it. But at the same time, there's not a whole lot of midrash about it. There's not a whole lot of commentary about it because it is so problematic. But it is what we're going to look at tonight. So it's Genesis chapter 38. Chapter 37 was about Joseph and his brothers. We did read about Judah trying to save his brother, at least not kill him, sell him off to slavery. That was Judah's great idea. Reuben wanted to save Joseph completely. Judah's idea was not to kill him, but to sell him instead. So that's Judah's intervention. Is there a connection between that previous story and this story? Is there a connection between this story and other parts of Genesis, especially what we're going to read next week, which is the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife? Is there a connection to this story and the earlier story of Dinah, who was raped or taken without permission? And obviously there's another question, which is this connected to other stories later on in the Bible, specifically from the book of Samuel and Kings, in the story of King David, because there's some very eerie similarities, especially in this story, chapter 38. Also, as we said in chapter 37, in the fact that there's a coat of many colors, it's mentioned in chapter 37 as Joseph's coat, the coat, ornamented tunic, coat of many colors, and it's mentioned one other place in the story of King David. But there's some interesting similarities to this chapter and things we have later on in King David's story. King David is from the tribe of Judah, so he's connected to his ancestor Judah. They're from the same family, the same tribe. So let's take a look at the story. We're going to jump in, and again, welcome to the people that are with us on Facebook as well. You came on even without me trying to tease you into coming on. But yeah, we'll take a look at this. And again, I'm sure I got to remember, I got to watch, because I know other people are going to be jumping in tonight. But please don't hesitate to jump in with questions, comments, thoughts as we read this story. which, if not the most troubling and sexually uncomfortable story we have in the Bible, it's definitely in the top 3. So let's take a look. So the last thing we read about, Potiphar is the one who buys Joseph. That's literally the last words that we just read. And then it says, about that time, Judah left his brothers and camped near a certain Adulamite whose name was Hirah. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her into his household as a wife and cohabited with her. So this is the next thing that happens to Judah, is it says he left his brothers and was living amongst the Canaanites. The Adulamite, Adulam is a town, a Canaanite area, and he's living with in that area with a guy named Hirah. It says he marries a Canaanite wife. We don't know her name, but it is interesting that her father's name is Shua, and she's known as Bat-shua. Bat-shua, which is very, very similar to the name Bathsheba, who is King David's wife, the one who he has Solomon with. So the name Bat-shua and Bathsheba sound really, really similar. And what's interesting about it isn't just that they are like one letter off. The Vav, her name is Shua, and you can see her dad's name is Shua. The Shin and the Vav and the Ayin, those 3 Hebrew letters, the Vav has a vowel sound when it is got a dot in the middle or on the top, like in the word Shemo, O, or in Shua, where it's got an U sound. But if it isn't vocalized with one of those 2 dots, it has a V sound. So this name, Bat-shua, is Bathsheba without a dot in the middle. So it's even closer than you thought it was.
Coincidence?
Is it a coincidence? It seems like someone's playing a game. Someone's playing with the names. And of course, what's interesting about this is that he sees her and he takes her as a wife, right? He sees her, falls in love with her, whatever. He looks at her and he takes her. Now, in this, it doesn't say that she's married. She's the daughter of a Canaanite, but it is similar to the sense of what happens with Bathsheba, because he sees her bathing on the roof, and that's how he falls in love with her.
Was this written about the same time as the David story?
Is it written as the same? Depends on who you ask. If you ask people who believe that Moses wrote the book of Genesis, then it couldn't be. Is it written possibly at the same time? Absolutely. So it's very easily a play on her name. So that's one little tiny thing. But again, these are Canaanites. These are the fact that Judah, Jacob's family, are marrying Canaanites, what they're not supposed to be, right? I mean, that was kind of what, Jacob was sent up north in the first place for. It's what Isaac, was married to Rebekah for, to keep them away from the Canaanites. It's not the case. Now, the story is going to get a lot trickier than that. This is nothing. This is just Judah having a wife who's a Canaanite. But that's where the story starts. Now, it says she conceived and bore a son, and he named him Er. Er. Now, in English, the name Er means to make a mistake, at least with another R, but it's not similar in Hebrew. Does not have the same roots, does not have the same meanings. She conceived again and bore a son named Onan. And once again, she bore a son and named him Shelah. he was at Chazib when she bore him, which simply tells us that a little detail that Judah wasn't at home when his last son, Shelah, was born. So he has 3 sons with this woman named Bathshua, Onan, and Shelah. Now, that is important. The fact that he has 3 sons, and they're all the sons of Bathshua, the woman who's a Canaanite. And the next line simply tells us that Judah got a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. That's all it says. He has 3 sons. That's all the Torah tells us. The Bible has given us no details, how long this has taken, how old they are at the time. We don't know anything other than at some point he gets a wife for his oldest son, Her name is Tamar. Tamar means date, a date palm. It's a nice name. It's sweet. It's the name of honey or sweetness. But Judah's firstborn, was displeasing to Adonai, and Adonai took his life. Now, what's interesting here, of course, is as you can see, they just wrote out the Yud He Vav He. They didn't even say Lord and say Hashem or Adonai. They actually used the Hebrew. I have no idea, by the way. I have no idea why this translation or this version didn't. There's not a reason for it. I mean, there's not like it. We don't know. The other thing is, we don't know what he did. We don't know what he did. We don't know what was displeasing. We don't know what he did wrong. But we know he did something wrong, at least in God's eyes. Was he worshiping other gods? We don't know. Was he behaving badly in some other way, immorally? Was he doing something that, we don't even want to imagine? We don't know. It doesn't say, but it does say that God took his life. That God killed him. So his death is a punishment. And it wasn't like, the good die young. It says he did bad in God's eyes. Whatever he did was not good. Displeasing, the word used there is ra be'inei Adonai. It was bad in God's eyes. Displeasing, fine, whatever. What does the King James say? It's a little bit better. Displeasing seems like it's God's subjective judgment on this. I mean, the word, when we say something's bad, that's a subjective decision sometimes, right? Like, I don't like that. That tastes bad. Well, it tastes bad to you. It may not be bad. Maybe someone else might like it. You don't like it. We use the word bad in our English to mean something that's a subjective decision or choice or opinion. But ra in Hebrew also can mean evil, wicked. Okay, so he died. He didn't die, he was killed. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't like he got sick. God killed him. So
Did they know that God killed him?
That's what the Bible says.
No, I mean his father.
Well, that's an interesting question. Did Judah feel that this was just an accident? Like, did God know and nobody else knew? It's possible. It's possible. Let's keep that in mind, because maybe it wasn't well known that we'll just keep it in mind.
Someone knew.
God knew, yeah. The text tells us that what he did was bad, but it doesn't say what. But the question of whether Judah knew, whether Judah was in denial about it, or whether he did know, we don't know. Well, let's keep that in mind. Let's look at it. I don't think we know, but so then Judah says to Onan, join with your brother's wife and do your duty by her as a brother-in-law and provide offspring for your brother. And of course, if you look at the note, it says duty is Deuteronomy 25:5, the law of Levirate marriage, the law of Yibum, which is you have to impregnate your sister-in-law with your dead brother's baby. It's not your baby.
This law comes in many, many years later.
What do you mean? mean, because it's in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
So the assumption here, clearly by this author, is that it was already known, right? That the law was already there, right? Law was on the books, which it could have been. But here's the weird thing to keep in mind. Just because the law is on the books doesn't mean that people did it or wanted to do it. So everybody understands what's happened. If he's the oldest brother, Er was the oldest brother. Now, it doesn't matter, by the way, if he's the oldest brother. If he was younger than him, if Er was younger than Onan and Er died without giving the wife a baby, he'd still have to impregnate her. It's just not, he's like a surrogate father. I mean, today, in today's world, he would simply be a sperm donor. They would literally extract the sperm and they would make the baby, and people would say, yeah, that makes sense. By the way, think about it for a second, because this will become more and more possible as we get better and better with creating life, genetically reproducing the way we want to, reproduce. If somebody told you today that a man died, I don't know, make up any story you want. The guy got sent overseas and got killed in Afghanistan, and his wife was left behind and never had a kid. And they said, well, let's the younger brother, let's take some of his DNA and give this woman a baby because she wants to have a baby. She wanted to have a baby with this guy. Most people would say, I could see that. I mean, maybe you don't like that idea, but there's definitely people who would say, yeah, that's kind of sweet. She wants to see a baby, what kind of baby she'd have with her husband. I mean, people wouldn't say that's weird. I mean, maybe you would. I don't think it's weird. I mean, I think there are people who get that. Look, I mean, part of you would say, well, just go out and get another husband and have a baby with somebody else. But who's to say that, this woman loves this man, wanted to have a baby with him, tried to have a baby, whatever. You wouldn't say, no, you can't have a baby with him. You'd say, oh, well, if the family is up for that you would say, hey, look, if we can get some of his DNA off of a hairbrush and we can clone him with that cell, nobody would say, oh, you can't do that. So this is the next closest thing, taking a cell from a brother. The problem is that they didn't have that technology, and it means you have to have sex with somebody. So that is really the issue here, folks. But the law itself isn't bad. There's only one real problem for this, which we'll talk about in one moment. But Onan, knowing that the offspring will not count as his, let the semen, which it doesn't actually say let the semen, but let his seed go to waste. But nothing wrong with that translation, right? He spoiled it on ground, let it go to waste. What does the King James say? Yeah. Whenever he joined with his brother's wife, so as not to provide offspring for his brother. What is the translation that they have on the King James, by the way, Mary? When it says after he spilled his seed, what does it say? So the translation here does something here which is possible from the text, but the translation that we have here doesn't really take away any ambiguity. Whenever he joined means it happened more than once. Does it make a difference? Yeah, to me it does. Because if he did it one time, he just didn't want to, he just felt, I got to do it. And maybe I've done it once, but that he did it repeatedly. And what he did was displeasing to God too. Again, vayira, same word, vayira b'nei Adonai. It was bad in God's eyes. It was evil. And he took his life also. So he died too. So now two sons have died. Now, as we said, this is somewhat problematic because, they're following this law so that the woman would have a baby and be protected and not die childless. So that having a baby would ensure her a financial stake in Judah's household. Because that boy would inherit. So Onan, it says, knowingly did this, knowing that it would not be his. What were you going to say, Mike, about that? No, you said this was problematic. It's really problematic. But it's problematic in a way you may not realize in this particular situation. Right? Does anybody get what Onan's predicament is here? Maybe something, again, you may have read this story before, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but what is Onan's predicament in particular? He has actually a real big problem there. Now you would go, well, it's not fair. The kid's not his. That stinks. I don't like that idea.
If there is a child, then he can't inherit his brother's wealth, right?
Yeah. His
So
older brother died. Yes, that's it, Sarah. His older brother dies childless. Guess who inherits? Onan. He had a vested interest in making sure this woman didn't have a baby.
But why not just make her another wife of his? Since he clearly doesn't mind sleeping with her.
So, okay. So let's say that he could do that. Let's say that he did do that. Let's say that was, let's play that out. The weird issue here is, and again, look, we don't know what happens in a family dynamic. None of us knows what happens in a family, or especially in this family. And I think every family is different, and this would be really weird. But play this out, Sarah. So Onan has a baby. Let's call him Jim. His name's not going to be Jim, but I'm just saying his name is Jim, but it's not Onan's son. I too want to pick a name that no one's going to say was a Jewish guy. So Jim grows up, and here's the weird thing. Jim actually inherits more than his biological dad. So Jim is not beholden to take care of Onan at all, his dad, because it's not his dad. His dad's a dead guy named Er, and he does not need to give Onan anything. He's the number one inheritor. So this guy's, now you could say, well, maybe he loves him, takes care of him. Maybe this guy is kind of his surrogate dad too, and he takes him out and plays baseball with him and stuff. That they had a really good relationship. But it doesn't really matter. And it doesn't still no guarantee that when Jim grows up, that he wants to take care of his dad, uncle, surrogate dad at all. And he doesn't have to. He's not beholden to him at all.
And it didn't say earlier whether or not Onan has children of his own from a different marriage, from a marriage of his own, does it?
Yes. So that could be it too. He could already. So to answer your question, why didn't he just take her as a wife? Because he might have already had a wife, and he said, you know what? I'm fine with my kids inheriting all of Judah's stuff. My oldest son, Harold, whatever, he's going to inherit everything. Abner. That's at least a Jewish name. But anyways, they got, well, Harold's a Jewish name too, but only because there are a lot of Jews that had that name, 70, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Anyways.
I mean, it's still Jared's thing to do, because if he didn't want that, he didn't have to sleep with her at all. I mean, he wasn't.
Wait a second. So Sarah, wait. So yeah, finish what you're going to say, Doreen.
Well, I don't think he had a choice. He wouldn't have, if he would have had a choice, then he would have said, no, I want to marry her, and my sons will then become the inheritors, and I will be the inheritor as well. But he was like told that he had to marry this wife, his brother's wife, not marry her, have a child, and it would not even be his.
It's fair to say it's fair to say that what Doreen said is exactly what the Bible says, because Judah said to Onan, join with your brother's wife. He didn't say, oh, you know what? I'm supposed to sleep with her because that's what we do. That's our rule. His dad says, go sleep with her. That's your job.
Right. And theoretically, she didn't produce a child because, and that's maybe why he had to keep sleeping with her, because Judah doesn't know he's not finishing it.
So here's the question. Well, whether it
He
happened,
doesn't know how he's handling the end.
okay, but that's the interesting thing. If it happened one time, then you could say, well, it happened once. But if it happened more than once, where we would translate it as whenever he joined with her, then that's a whole nother issue. And what's
One
also
would assume that the father was like, join with her until she conceives. And of course, she's not going to conceive because of what he's doing. But
yeah, we
you didn't-
just don't know, because the translation is, I mean, the original Hebrew, the translation that they used here is whenever he joined, v'haya im ba. So im ba seems to imply when he joined, as opposed to he did it once. So the word im there, which means if or when, it
Well,
seems to me.
he would be obligated to keep sleeping with her until she conceived.
Okay, but again, if it happened one time, you could make the argument, happened one time, he didn't want to do it. Nobody really said anything. It happened, nothing happened. If it happened repeatedly, okay, and then again, I think that, and the King James doesn't say whenever, right? It doesn't say whenever.
When he went in unto his brother's wife.
Yeah, so what the King James says when he went in. So it doesn't mean that he did it. The when is still there. But when is not whenever. Whenever implies it happened more than once. So
Right, well, what I'm saying is the obligation would be to keep doing it until she conceived. And of course, if he's not,
but here's
speculating in her, she's never going to conceive. So he would still be sleeping with her, potentially forever, until so long as he's not getting her pregnant when he's sleeping with her, which is totally not following the rule, of course. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, so here's the question. If it happened one time, is what I was saying, is if it happened one time, you could say it was just a bad relationship and it didn't work and she didn't get pregnant, whatever. If this happened repeatedly, she knows what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a big deal to
Yeah,
me.
But I don't know that Judah knows what's happening.
For everybody, and maybe it wasn't for every man to consider this. But if he did this repeatedly to her, then again, I don't want to say that this is rape, because it's not exactly rape, but it kind of is. It's not rape in that he's forcing himself on her, but he's being forced on her by tradition, by the rules, and he's essentially taking advantage of her. And so if it's not rape, then it's definitely like some type of sexual abuse, I would say. By definition, using the rules to then take advantage of somebody is almost as if he's a boss who sleeps with his secretary because she's afraid of saying anything and she doesn't want to get fired, right? And so while most people wouldn't say that it's not technically rape, it's something wrong. It's not right. It's not a way a relationship. It's a very imbalanced relationship that doesn't seem like it should be allowed. God didn't allow it. God killed the guy. So we don't know what his brother did to deserve to die, but we know what he did deserve to die. Did he do the same thing to his wife? Maybe. Didn't say it, but some people think so. There's a midrash that he did the same thing to his wife. Why didn't it say it? I don't know. But if he did the same thing to his wife,
And he's an even bigger jerk than he was just doing it to her.
this is a really, really bad story of again, a woman who's trapped by these rules.
Yeah, because there's nowhere in there that even contemplates the fact that she wanted him to have sex with her.
Yeah.
Well, what choice does she have? She only can depend upon whatever wealth her husband has left her. And if she can't get access to it unless she has a child, then she's homeless with nothing.
So now we understand why this woman, and again, have the proper context of everything that we need to consider when we think about this story, about this woman in particular, because she has society, the rules of society. She's trapped in this family dynamic, which is not good, to say the least. And we're going to see again how this plays out. But this is a really tough situation for this woman who, when we consider this and look at this in a little bit more detail, how tough her existence was. We don't know how long this was going on for. Was it going on for a year? Was it going on for many years? Was it going on when she was married to Er, and then it went on for another year or two when it was going on with Onan? Now, before we move on from Onan, just for a second, because we need to say something about Onan. And I will say this to you now as I bring up, what's a good dictionary? What's a good dictionary for people? Are people pretty good with the Merriam-Webster dictionary? That's a legit dictionary, right?
Yes.
Let's look up, shall we, what the word onanism is. There's 3 definitions for onanism. The first one is masturbation. The second one is coitus interruptus. And the third one is self-gratification. Now, those are the words, that's the way the word is defined in the dictionary. The number 1 definition was masturbation. I challenge you to tell me how this is what happened in this story. But onanism for centuries
Yes.
is referred to as, that's the fancy way of saying masturbation. That's not what happens in the story. And so this story was held up as an example of something that literally people said the Bible says that masturbation is something that God doesn't like, and you will be killed if you do it, just like Onan. So the sin of onanism, was pretty serious because God could kill you for doing it. And that's not what it is. It's the second definition. Okay, if you want to call something, if you want to name something after Onan, it was coitus interruptus, but it wasn't that. And while you can maybe argue that there's self-gratification in the sense that he was gratified, well, we don't know if she wasn't gratified, but she didn't get what she was supposed to get out of it, which was a kid. She could at least say is lopsided or an unfair exchange. It's not really what happens. And so for centuries, masturbation was classified by the church as something that was evil and was something that could be punished by humans, because the punishment otherwise would be punishment from God. So this is real. These were real consequences from this story. So I challenge you to tell me how this is a story of someone. Focus on this is definitely not. I mean, it doesn't seem to be masturbation at all. That is an amazing piece of history, culture. People got punished, beaten, killed for a biblical sin that isn't a biblical sin.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, it's not it couldn't have been translated in a way that would indicate that it was just masturbation, right? I mean, like,
There's no context where that's even here. Because it says when he went into her, whenever he joined with her, he didn't do it just randomly. I mean, that's why it's such a terrible translation or such a terrible concept or understanding.
Yeah, I've heard
Well,
this
it's
a
also-
lot.
What?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's also a situation where the leaders of a religious organization became dictatorial and took what was written, recast it, lied about it, and made everybody obey them.
Yeah. Yep. And it was
And it's not good.
never cast that way in Judaism. It was never cast that way.
Good, I'm glad. I'm very glad that it did. It
There
was,
are people at this very minute who are still being told and being, in some cases,
punished.
punished because of this.
Yes.
So,
It's some of what they did with COVID, with the demands and the mandates and the you must do this and you must do that, without the real science behind everything they demanded.
well, definitely makes us think about, Joyce, about people misinterpreting and punishing people.
And using fear to get people to obey them. Same issue. Very interesting. Very interesting.
So Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Stay as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought he too might die like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. So Judah decides to get her out of the house.
Mhm.
And he seems to have either lied to her or really felt like somehow if she wasn't in the house, we'll forget about the whole thing, which is that I have another son. And his name is Shelah. So he's not as old as his brothers, but at some point he's going to be ready. And then he will meet the same fate as his older two brothers. Look, Judah has no reason. You could say he doesn't know. He doesn't know what's been going on with Onan. He didn't know what was going on with Onan. But he's looking at what's happened to his family, and he's had two sons die being married to this woman, and he's like, I'm not going to lose another. I'm not making an excuse for it. I'm not saying he did anything right. But you can understand where his mind was going. You can understand what the logic was, which is let's get this woman out of the house. So he sends her away to live with her father, sends her back home. Now, he does hold out hope that Shelah is going to be her husband one day. So he did say that to her.
So he was willing to marry Shelah, but not Onan.
What do you mean?
You never told Onan that he could marry her and then the son would be his, so to speak. But with Shelah, he's saying that he will marry her.
Well, he doesn't actually say that you'll marry her. He just says that he does say that there is this other son that you could sleep with one day. But as far as married him, I don't know. But he basically says stay as a widow, which means don't have sex with any other man, which is essentially saying we'll take care of you. We will take care of you. That's what he says. He says, we'll take care of you. Just, continue on and I will do this. So it says in the next verse, a long time afterward, which is not, again, any indication that this was another month. It seems to be, it's years later. A long time afterward, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, she's still called Bat Shua there. Bat Shua. She doesn't have a name. She's Bat Shua. Eshet Yehuda, the wife of Judah, died. When his period of mourning was over, Judah went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, together with his friend Hirah the Adulamite. So sheep shearing was something that the nomadic peoples did at a certain time of year, usually around the springtime, where they would take their sheep up and shear them and gather up the wool and sell it. And this was a way for, after the winter time, and they didn't need to have the long wool anymore. This was a way for, this is how they made money. This was one of the ways that they made money. It wasn't the only way. They would also kill the sheep, or they would milk the sheep, or they would, they would have, they would sell the sheep to people. But this is another way of making money. So this was a big, assumedly like a big time of year where people would make money who were nomads, who were specifically, taking care of sheep. So we know that his wife is dead. We know that he's going up out of town. He's on a business trip. Okay, a business trip. And then he went out with his old buddy Hirah. His old buddy Hirah, who, he knew back from his college fraternity. No, he was his buddy. That's what it says. It was his fun. It was his friend. This is this guy that he's known for a long time. So Tamar was told, your father is coming up to Timnah for sheep shearing. So she took off her widow's garb, covered her face with a veil, and wrapping herself up, sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given to him as wife. Now there it does say wife. It does flat out there say wife. You can see the word Enaim, which is either an actual place or an open place at the crossroads. What's the King James say there?
Open place.
So is it a place, like an actual place, or is it a crossroads, a place out in the open? Because the word Enaim comes from the word to see, right, for eyes. So is this a place kind of out in the open? We don't know. There's different translations. This translation likes that it's actually a place, but they recognize that in other translations, because there is a place called Enam, which is a variation of that, or other places it says at a crossroads. So look, it makes sense that she's in an open place, a place at crossroads. She's at the junction of, what was it? It was like Sunset and not Vine, but it was Sunset and somewhere where back in the day, that was, no, it was Sunset Strip, right?
There's also a Camden and Sunset Strip.
No, I know, but I'm talking about the Sunset Strip back in the 70s, Doreen, where people knew what you went down on the Sunset Strip for.
No.
So is she in a place where everyone knew that if she was there, that she is a prostitute? So it says she took off her widow's garb, but she's still wearing a veil. Now, it says right away why she did it. There's no question that she sees that Shelah was old enough and she had not been given to him yet. So she knows. She also knows she's not getting any younger, because a long time had passed. Said a lot of time had passed. Maybe again, she's down by the water, looks up, sees a little gray hair there, and goes, "This is not going the way I wanted it to go. Not the way it was supposed to go." So she goes down to the crossroads, and she's still wearing a veil. So even though she's not wearing the widow's clothing anymore, which it seems like she was still wearing, many, many moons later, she's still wearing widow's garb, which again tells us that widows wore a certain kind of clothing, which is what it says. And notice the clothes are an important part of the story, just like they were in the coat of many colors, just like they were in some of the stories we've been reading in Samuel, like the coat that Samuel is wearing, his outer mantle, his coat. Clothes are oftentimes very important. Story of Jacob and Esau wearing his brother's clothes. So the clothes are very important in these stories. In this case, the fact that she is exchanging the widow's garb for the garb of a streetwalker. That's what it says. Right? Because when Judah saw her, he took her for a harlot, for she had covered her face. Now, it says he can't see her face. I mean, the story only works if he can't see her face. It also is interesting that, like, I don't know if you find it strange, but the fact that people were like knew that if you went to a harlot, she'd oftentimes have a veil over her face doesn't seem like the best way to be a harlot, but it must be that was what people did, or at least it was known that they could do that, which is cover their face and still get business. That's what it says. The story only works if he never knows who she is, right? If he can see her face, there's no story here. It only works if she's wearing a mask. Oh, there you go. If you want to talk about masks, this is a relationship that happened while she was wearing a mask. See, there's your relevance there. She covered her face. And by the way, it says a zonah. He took her for a harlot. That's really important in the first line, or the first time that we see her, or he sees her, that he takes her as a harlot. Yep. He takes her for a zonah, which is a streetwalker. Why is that important? We'll see. Well, there's different kinds of prostitutes. This one is a zonah. This is a streetwalker. This is a harlot or a prostitute. Well, that's why they translated it as harlot. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Here, let me sleep with you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. What, she asked, "Will you pay me for sleeping with me?" Which, of course, also tells us that it's very important in these negotiations to establish your price.
Beforehand.
Yes. And that's what she says. He says, "Let me sleep with you. Let me come in and I don't know that sleeping was ever actually implied in there at all. What is the King James on that one, Mary?
Let me come in unto you.
Yeah, I like the King James on that one better too, because the sleeping is implied by the English translation here for sex, but the word is ba. The word is avo elecha. It's the word come onto you, come in, and of course the English has the same connotation today, but it doesn't say sleep. There's a word for sleep. It's not there. There's no question that this isn't someplace he wants to take a nap. That's why the King James is much better on there, because the word there is, again, how much will you pay me for tavo elecha, for coming to me, coming into me. I mean, that's what the words actually say. Again, it is a euphemism, like we talked about before. Now, again, we also know that there's another euphemism for sex, which is to know, right? To know somebody, which is interesting because that word is used as well, but it's used in the connection, the connotation, or the usage is clearly that he did not know but she was his daughter-in-law. That's where the word yada is used. So the word yada, which is also sexual, but not here in this situation. Here it's maybe even implied as a little bit as a wordplay. He did not know that he was going to know his daughter-in-law. I mean, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. But in English, you know, you could also do that. So she says, what are you going to pay me? What is the payment? And he replied, I will send you a kid from my flock. But she said, you must leave a pledge until you have sent it. So yeah, I don't want to go on too far because I just love this exchange. Because let's think about this for a second. So we know that he just came from shearing the sheep. And he says, I'll give you one of the sheep. What do you think? Is that a normal price for a night with a prostitute, or low price, or crazy price? Anybody guess? He just said, I'm going to pay you a kid from the flock. Anybody? We don't know the exact exchange rate back then, okay? But we know enough.
But a kid also can provide a lot more for him in a night with a prostitute.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question again. It's a gedi izim. It's a healthy baby goat or kid from the flock. It's probably a goat, not a sheep in this case, but that's why it's a kid.
It would be a good price.
Good price. So I'm going to give you three choices: cheap, fair, or crazy.
No, crazy. There.
Mary?
Crazy.
Crazy. It's crazy price. Anybody who's going to say that's crazy, that's nuts. You don't pay that much for a night with a prostitute.
Some people do.
I guess, but this was not somebody who he felt
It wasn't a high price.
this is a harlot by the side of the road. This is a street. This is crazy money. This is crazy money. This is like, what's he thinking?
But not for her.
Okay, so, well, wait, the assumption is that it's crazy money for her. But so he,
This is great.
I
Wow.
am sheep shearing, and he's like,
Oh.
you know, maybe I don't know how many sheep he had. You know, maybe it doesn't seem like such a big deal to him if he's got a lot of sheep. You know, maybe he's like, yeah, I'll give you one of my sheep because he's a big spender that day.
no, I think Sarah's 100. I think Sarah's 100% right. He's trying to send a message to her that he's a big shot. The funny thing is she knows that. Not only does she know that, she's trying to get his money in the first place, which is the funny thing, which is, yeah, look what a big spender I am. And she's thinking to himself, you got no idea. You're for a whole lot more than a goat. But it is funny, as Mike says, it's the one goat. This is Had God Yah. This is a little Passover play. This is Had God Yah. This is a Gedi. This is one goat. Gedi is Izim.
If you have one goat,
Yeah.
then you only have one goat.
Yeah.
Then if you need, I mean, you can't procreate one goat.
Yeah, but it's a lot of money. It's got a huge
For her,
value.
It's a few meals.
Okay, so but she can still sell it.
Yeah.
So she could sell it for more than what she normally would have. So what would a normal price have been? A normal price would have been if the equivalent of a few loaves of bread, right? It would have been, so let's say that she normally would have gotten $300 or $200 or $500. He just gave her $1,000. He just gave her $2,000, $1,000, $2,000, the equivalent of $1,000, $2,000. I mean, look, what's weird is, like, we ever watch those like Western movies where, the guy goes into the saloon and they never actually show the scene where he's paying for the prostitute, but he's paying like a nickel and you're like, you don't even want to hear that, right? It's, a nickel meant something different there, but you just don't want to hear it. Look, it's literally, you're paying somebody for the exchange of what somebody is doing in that moment is some part of their humanity. It's some part of their power. It's some part of who they are, part of themselves. The weird thing about this scene is that it is from the side of how much money he pays her. It's a lot of money. So however we want to understand it, it's a lot. But the great response that she says to him is you must leave a pledge until you have sent it. So she doesn't trust him.
No, she doesn't trust him.
And what's wonderful about that is she has every right not to trust him because he already lied to her. He's already promised her the son that she was supposed to marry. And he doesn't get it. You know, he literally is not trusted because he's proven that he's not trustworthy. And so this is the guy, Judah, the same guy who just sold his brother to Midianite slave traders. This is the same guy who had the wherewithal to come up with, let's not kill him, let's sell him. And look what just happened. He doesn't have any cash on him.
He's not a nice guy.
And now he's got to pay. And now he's got to pay. And so she says, I don't take your word for it. You have to leave me some collateral. Leave me a pledge. Now, at this point, you're saying to yourself, well, look, his wife is dead. But he seems really, 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 when you're jumping through these hoops, he's really hungry for it. That's all you can say. Because he says, what pledge shall I give you? And she replied, your seal and cord and the staff with which you carry. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she conceived by him. Then she went on her way. She took off her veil and again put on her widow's garb. So the exchange is three things. I mean, the things that she holds on to are three things: his seal, his cord, and the staff. Now, assumedly, the seal and the cord, look, assumedly, any of these things would have been worth something in the sense that they're collateral that are more valuable than the goat. So the weird thing is, he basically doesn't have the goat. He doesn't have the goat with him. The goat's out getting sheared, or the goat's back with the other people. He doesn't have the goat with him, but he has these things with him, which are essentially the modern equivalent of saying, I mean, the staff, most of us don't walk around with a staff, but you know, it's part of our stuff. It'd be like our phone, and maybe the equivalent of his wallet, because it's definitely, his seal is definitely his credit card, or his driver's license for sure. It's the thing that he seals his documents with. When he makes an agreement, when he signs a deed, when he sells something, when he buys something, he needs to have that seal. So he seals it, and that's his driver's license. That's his credit card. That's his identification. That's how people know who he is, what he is. 100%. That's more valuable than the goat in the first place.
So then that's crazy.
Crazy.
Crazier.
It's crazier.
I think it's fair. Fair market value is whatever the bear will bear.
Now, you and I can both say, this is crazy.
It's like he knew something was off. I mean,
No,
because
to me, it's inconceivable.
yeah, because
I mean, you're gonna sleep with
and
someone.
then she
that
goes
keep
back
veil
and
on?
puts her widow's garb on, and she's pregnant. That's immaculate conception then.
No.
It's gonna be interesting to see how that works out.
Look,
Definitely.
look, I want to tell you something. What happens is that when somebody when somebody is that obsessed with having sex that he's willing to put himself in jeopardy, these kinds of things can happen.
So far, this story is inconceivable.
Why? Why?
She has a veil on. They sleep together and she has a veil on. And then she sleeps with him once and conceives, and she knows she's conceived. None of this makes sense. Sorry, that's in my humble opinion.
So you would say that this kind of stuff doesn't happen?
No, I didn't say that.
Because here's my
This is a story.
here's my famous story. Because when Jerry Springer was a city councilman from Cincinnati, he paid for prostitutes with personal checks.
No, that story
In
is-
December 1973 and 1974, he was a councilman. So the question was, how is somebody so stupid that when they're a sitting council person that they pay for prostitutes with personal checks?
I'm not gonna sleep with someone with a veil on.
You know what?
You're not gonna get pregnant. You could get pregnant first, but how is she gonna know that for another month?
But that doesn't tell you the length
Or
of time.
it's a-
Does it tell you the length of time on that? No, so.
I'm only gonna tell you, people do some crazy
I
stuff, Mike.
understand that, but I don't think the story is conceivable.
Well, I will definitely tell you this. It is conceivable. It's exactly conceivable. That's how she conceived. It's conceivable.
Yes, yes.
I
Uh,
don't support is what you,
all I want to tell you is that whenever somebody says something's inconceivable, then I find out it already happened. So when people told me the Jerry Springer story, which I think I found out well after I knew he had a TV show, I thought to myself, gosh, the guy seemed like a smart guy. I knew he was the mayor of Cincinnati. I knew he had a political career. I had no idea that he got elected after that, which shows you that people don't care. But what's so weird is that people do some weird stuff. And I never am surprised anymore when somebody tells me. Now, again, you'd be like thinking, how would somebody sleep with somebody who had a veil on? And Mike, I look, it's not the same thing, not the same story. And you're right. Clearly, almost God had to get involved in this in order for this woman to get pregnant. It seems like it was a miracle that she got pregnant.
Not a miracle, that happened.
Okay, but I'm conceding what you're saying. Well, first of all, it doesn't say that, it says she conceived. It doesn't say everyone knew. But look, she also knows when she's ovulating, so it's not like it's completely out of the realm of possibility. But what's really interesting about this is I would have said 2 years ago, I would have said what Mike said, which is, this is insane. How, like I even said it tonight. He goes to see her in a corner on the street corner, and she's wearing a veil, and he wants to sleep with her.
That I can see. He has his needs. Yeah, I understand that.
I was going to tell you something. I agreed with you until 2 years ago, because you know what happened in the last 2 years? Strip clubs were open with people wearing masks. Like you would have said, that's not possible. It is possible. It happened.
well, I mean, no offense, but I don't think he's that interested in her
I'm just saying, I would have said 2 years ago, this story is ridiculous. But now I'm thinking, yeah, it's
No,
been
I'm not
proven.
saying ridiculous.
But it's
I'm
been
saying-
proven. People paid money in the last 2 years. People probably in this country, I have no idea what the total was, but it's in the millions that paid to women who they couldn't see their faces.
Were you there?
I was not there. I was not there, but I was tempted to see what kind of craziness, that people are. Look, I don't know. Call me old fashioned, but that seems
I'm just saying
insane.
the writers of the story embellished.
I'm only telling you that it's possible. Any of these elements, the fact that
Yes, are
gives away-
possible.
he gives
Yes.
away his stuff, right? He gives away his stuff to her because he's so desperate
I
at that
can
moment.
understand that.
And the fact that he's wearing a veil, like I get it now. And again, look, we have to also remember something culturally. We live in a society where people show everything. But if you live in a country like Saudi Arabia, where you only see somebody's eyes, I'm sure this weird stuff happens. I don't mean to. That sounds terrible that I said it's
No, it
weird.
doesn't.
I said, look.
They're not.
It happens in our own community. You have women who have beautiful hair. They're wearing wigs. I mean, I'm not. I should never say I'm judging that. I'm just saying it happens. That's what I'm really trying to say is it happens.
But what I'm saying is, I understand what you're saying about the strip club, but these guys aren't sleeping with them.
I
No romance.
I only know that the same thing goes though with people falling in love with some woman. You know that it happens in Saudi Arabia. You know that it happens with people wearing hijabs, that they fall in love with people that they've never seen.
But do they, I mean, when they sleep with him, do they still have?
I don't
you
know.
the
No,
veil
I
on?
guess not. I guess
Yeah,
not.
but
I
wait a
don't
minute,
know.
when some of those women, DeRoe, they had on Versace and Gucci and Dior and all different kinds from head to toe. Oh my God.
It could be, but I will tell you that but at least they fall in love or they are attracted to the person by only seeing their eyes. I'm just telling you.
That's the first part of the story. I don't have a problem.
I know. So the
I don't
issue.
know. I think you're looking at it from a more romantic kind of notion. I don't think he's interested in her face, clearly. He's interested in her body and sleeping with her.
No,
I've never been with the prostitute.
I will only tell you, Mike, that I guarantee you, in the last 2 years, I guarantee it. I mean, I can't guarantee it because I'm not going to go and pull. I'm not going to. That's not the.
Ladies and
I don't want to say. I don't want to
gentlemen,
say. I was going to say pull. I'm not going to talk about the pull. I was going to say that I would guarantee you that there were relationships that were had with people in the last 2 years where the man or woman never pulled down their mask, but they still had sex.
I disagree. Prove it.
I'll look it up. And I want to actually, no, I'm not going to look it up because I'm sure that can be found on the internet real quick. I think that stories though of people who, yeah, I think it happened. Wait a second. Am I the only one who thinks that that's happened over the last 2 years?
No, I agree.
I think it's happened.
I think it's
It
happened.
totally makes sense that he'd have sex with her with a veil on. I don't think he really cares what she looks like in terms of her face.
All I know is that 2 years ago, I would have agreed with Mike that there's no way anyone keeps on a veil while they're having sex. I'm not so sure anymore. Because I think it's happened. I think the weird, like you'd be like, that's crazy, right? Because aren't you more worried about an STD than COVID? But I don't, like, I think people just followed it. I think people like I don't even think people questioned it.
We can move on.
I'm just saying.
We can agree to disagree, 'cause this is a bunch of crap.
It's not because what happened is in the last couple of years, reading this has changed. It's changed for me. And it tells you that when you read the text, sometimes you change.
Absolutely. I haven't changed.
So
In fact, I changed for the other side. Right? It was, after reading this a few times. That was
Oh,
legitimate.
look at
After
this.
reading
Wait.
no, I'm not done. I'm not done yet.
Okay, yeah.
So Judah sent the kid by his friend, the Adulamite, to redeem the pledge from the woman, but he could not find her.
Yeah.
He inquired of that locale, where is the prostitute, the one by Enaim by the road? But they said, there's been no prostitute here. So it comes and with the kid to get the stuff back. But he can't find her. Nobody seems to know. So he goes to the local people, says the council, but it's the men of the town of that area. And he says, where is the Kadesha that was out here by Enaim, by the crossroads or by this town Enaim that was on the road? I'm going to go with the crossroads, by the way. The more I read this line, I like the crossroads rather than a place. But in this area, at the intersection, it's really what it is. It's the intersection of the derech, of the crossroads by the road. But he says a Kadesha. He didn't say a Zona. The friend, when he went to the council or to the people of the town, he didn't say, where's the prostitute or the harlot, the streetwalker. He says, where's the Kadesha? That's not what Judah thought she was. So before you say, well, does it really matter? Well, I'll tell you why it matters. Because they functioned differently in the sense that, what's the translation for the King James say, Mary?
Harlot.
She used the same word, harlot? Not a good King James translation. Kadesha, and that's probably because the King James was written at a time and we didn't really think that much about it. Look at the note here. Meaning of Hebrew, Kadesha, uncertain, perhaps a type of female functionary at a religious site, traditionally harlot. The new JPS calls it a cult prostitute. But the notion that the ancient Near Eastern religions included prostitution as a religious act has since been discredited. So they've gone back and forth on this issue. But what the Kadesha has at its root is the word kadosh, which means holy or sacred, which is why they translate it as a sacred prostitute or as a different level, which seems to imply either someone who is not just some harlot that hangs out by the side of the road, but is a well-known person for doing this.
Escort.
Yeah, man, I was gonna say escort. I don't know if that's the right term, but I think so. Let's go with it. That she's a well-known escort, or she's somebody who is well respected for this, in the sense that the word kadesh is used for it, which is why they went with a cult prostitute. But it's interesting that that's not, he didn't ask for a zonah, he asked for a kadesha. So were they even talking about the same thing? Well, you and I would say, well, she wasn't a local prostitute. She wasn't a kadesha anyways. She's pretending to be. So they could say, well, we didn't know. She was out there one day. We didn't know. We wouldn't necessarily have known. That's not what he asked for in the first place, which was interesting, because did Judah or did the friend Hira try to make this look like it wasn't quite as
Scandalous.
yeah, or just the random hookup with a streetwalker? So we don't know. I mean, this note here actually shows you how they've gone back and forth on this. And they've oh, that's the wrong note. Sorry, that was this one. That they've gone back and forth on. That they've gone back and forth on it. I will only tell you that it is interesting that they use a different word. The word zonah and kadesha are different, and that's why they should be translated. They should be translated somewhat differently. So the interesting thing is that he returned to Judah and said, I could not find her. Moreover, the local council said, there has been no prostitute here. Which again, I think they probably put the same note. Yeah. When Shammah come, townspeople. And Judah's response is, let her keep them, lest we become a laughingstock. I did send her this kid, but you did not find her. So we looked for her. We couldn't find her. We asked about her. We didn't know. Yeah. So number one, he can't say anything more about it because we'll become a laughingstock, because people will think we're idiots, or they'll think we're really, really messed up that we did this. Why? Because we gave her really valuable stuff too. I mean, forget the fact that it's a prostitute. Forget that for a second. Maybe it's not an issue. Maybe it's not an issue at all for the Canaanites. But the fact that Judah lost 3 valuable things, was so desperate. Maybe all that is going on in his mind. It has nothing to do with the fact that he slept with a prostitute. It's going to make her look silly, make him look silly. It's that he paid her by check, So that could be the issue, that he doesn't want to look foolish, but he's not really he doesn't care about the morality of it. He just doesn't want to look foolish. And to some extent, he's overpaid and he's given up the stuff. So so that judgment that we would make today, or maybe even our ancestors made when the rabbis wrote this, and they knew about prostitution. The rabbis talk about it in the Talmud. It's not forbidden, but they definitely don't want to encourage it. There's stories about rabbis who were engaging in, that were consorting with prostitutes, and they were generally not seen as good leaders. But it wasn't like they were thrown out. It wasn't like they died. Actually, there was one case of a guy who died, but it wasn't just the prostitution. Anyways,
Judah wasn't married at the time either.
Judah is not married. Yes. But again, is this the kind of behavior that a distinguished man of society should be engaged in? Or again, just the fact that he's just lost all his marbles, that he's given all this money and sent these things, these giving this woman these things because he didn't have any money. I mean, the whole story just can make him look stupid. So that's what he says. We tried. We looked for her. We did. I sent it. You didn't find her. We asked around. Nobody found her. So we did our best. 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, which is the word zanta, that she has been like a zonah. In fact, she's pregnant from harlotry. And that's the word zenunim. Again, the word zenunim. And she is pregnant. Bring her out, Judah said. She should be burned.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So she's not living with him. She's not living with him. He doesn't have access to her, which is why the note says here, Judah had no jurisdiction over someone living in another household. So he doesn't really, he has to have permission for her to be punished. But he doesn't have her in his possession. She's not living in his, under his protection, in his homes. But he says she should be burned. That's the punishment.
From this point of view, now, it seems rather harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. As she was being brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law. It's by the man to whom these belong that I'm pregnant. And she added, examine these. Whose seal and cord and staff are these? And literally here, ish is the word that they used here, but I don't even know why that's a note, but look at these. Look at these. Right? Look at these. Who do they belong to? And the way that she says this to him is literally like the most clever, and it's the most kind of, it's such an ironic way of
We know who she slept with. But she could have slept with other guys.
yeah, but the issue is the fact that she has the only things that this guy has
I understand
that are his things are these. No, because the funny thing is if he had, I mean, look, it's
I'm
kind of
just saying she could have been pregnant with someone else.
fine, but this is what the
It doesn't matter. He still has his stuff.
obvious thing we could say. If he had paid her the goat in the first place, some goat, I don't know. You're telling me that's the goat I paid with? You don't know. She says, she brings out the goat. Whose goat is this? It's a goat I gave you 3 months ago. I don't know if that's the goat. It could be branded, but maybe it wasn't. I mean, it's a goat. But she has his driver's license. She literally has, the only guy that has this seal is him.
She has a driver's license and she's got his birth certificate.
Yeah,
She got
she's
everything.
got everything. So she literally has the evidence. She has the proof that no other proof could, there's no other proof.
Didn't have DNA back then.
No. So this is the best DNA. This is the best alternative. This is the best evidence that you could have. And
I'm in a mood tonight.
she sent this message to her father-in-law, which is interesting about this because it seems to be, she's not there. I mean, that's what I always kind of like. I always felt like she was there. Like, she's about to get burned and she says this, but she's actually protected herself by not being there to some extent and sending this information out. She sends it to him. She doesn't give it to him. She sends it to him. So she sends this stuff ahead and says, this is the stuff. So I always assumed that she was like in the, she was nearby, but maybe she wasn't. She could have been 15, 20 miles away. She doesn't have to be anywhere near him. Judah recognized him and said, she is more in the right than I, inasmuch as I did not give my son Shelah. And he was not intimate with her again.
What about the child that's gonna be born?
Okay, well, we'll get to it.
I wanna
We're
know
going to get to it. I promise you, we're very close to it. There's not a lot happening after this in this story. But he admits right away that she's right and he's wrong. So The Hebrew that is used is,
I don't understand the again. It never said he was given to her once.
no.
What?
He was intimate with her. That's how she got
Oh.
pregnant. What he doesn't do is sleep
I
with
thought
her.
I thought she was talking about the son
No.
Shelah.
He says, I didn't do it. So I didn't give him to Shelah. There's no need for him to give to Shelah now, right? Shelah doesn't, he's out of the equation now because she's pregnant. She's got her baby. So Shelah's done. He got Shelah.
And he's talking about himself here.
Yeah, he got Shelah off the hook. It's now,
Okay.
he's the hook. He's now been hooked. He's now, but he never has sex with her again. Yeah. He never has sex with her again. Which, at the end of the day, it's like, I guess, is that good? Is that bad? I mean, the whole thing is so bizarre. But he says, Vayomer tzedakah mimeni. She is righteous. She is more right than me. She is righteous. Tzedakah. You know the word tzedek. Tzaddik. She is more righteous than me. So I did the wrong thing and she did the right thing. Well, she maybe didn't do the right thing, but she did the only thing she could do. So here's a woman who has no power by the rules of society. And what does she do? She turns the tables on.
She was smart enough to do that.
So this is an example of one of the smartest, one of the most clever is an understatement, because there was no margin for her. There's no way for her to go. There was no other options for her. And she literally had to have everything go her way. So again, as Michael said, Mike, this is almost unbelievable because this is a miracle. But there are miracles in the Bible, and this is one of those miracles. This is a miracle that's wrought by a woman who uses her mind in a way that is just, it's remarkable. She's a remarkable woman. And she's our ancestor. This woman, Tamar, is our ancestor. What?
Mhm.
She is, but she's also the only woman that Judah has kids with that survive. Well, we don't know about Shelah.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know about Shelah, but I will tell you, we know about these kids. We'll get to it. I
There's
promised.
only the one kid,
I
right?
promised
She doesn't
Doreen.
have sex with her.
Okay, well,
Yeah, she has
I
twins.
told you a little something. I told you a little something, but I told you we'd get to it. But this is this great reveal. This is a great reveal, right? She was supposed to be burned, and what does she do? She burns him.
Love it.
When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb.
I was right.
Boom!
Right.
They were twins. There were twins. So, yep, there you go. He thought he was going to get out with only having one kid. Bless you. But he gets two kids. He gets two kids with his sons /
One to inherit from one husband and one to inherit from the. Does
yes,
she get to inherit both the Onar's stuff and her husband's stuff?
this is his sons / grandsons. They're his sons. They're also his grandsons. That's my own grandpa. It's not really, because this is my sons are also my grandsons. And it says, when she was in labor, one of them put out a hand, and the midwife tied a crimson thread on that hand to signify this one came out first. A little bit like the Jacob and Esau story, right?
Mhm.
The twins are struggling in the womb. Who's going to be born first? And once again, the red is a color. Just like Esau came out red, there's a red crimson thread tied around this kid's arm to show who came out first. But just then it drew back its hand and came out after its brother. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." So he was named Peretz. Peretz, the name Peretz means breach. Paretz. That's my brother-in-law's name. That's right, Peretz. We talked about it actually because the word came up in last week's Haftarah, which is interesting because it's from the book of Samuel. One of the other connections to Samuel. But yeah, a breach is something that breaks through, right? It's something that comes, that breaks through, right? It breaks through and his hand broke through, and Paretz is the name. That's the name Peretz. So it is a Hebrew name. Now again, Perez, it's not Perez, it's not Perez, which sounds a lot more Spanish.
How did Shannon pronounce it?
What?
How do they spell your grandma?
Peretz. But some people say Peretz and some people say Peretz, but it is a Hebrew name. The question is the Spanish name Perez a play off of that name? So did the Sephardic Jews who lived in Spain, did they take the name Perez because it was like the name Peretz? We don't know for sure, but it wasn't a real common Hebrew name as a first name, but it was, it was used. It was one of Judah's sons, so it's a legitimate name. Shimon Peres, Peres, was the prime minister of Israel and then president. Later on was president. No, they're not. Interestingly, though, Shimon Peres was a cousin of someone very famous, Lauren Bacall, and Shimon Peres were cousins. Her real name was Betty Jo Persky, and he was Persky. That was his family name was Persky as well. So they were both Ashkenazi Jews that had a mutual ancestor. But yeah, Lauren Bacall and Shimon Peres. What?
She was half Jewish though?
100% Jewish.
Really?
She just didn't talk about it a lot, but she was. I mean, she knew Yiddish and she was raised in a Jewish home. And she did talk to Shimon Peres about it later on, about how they were related. They both lived fairly long lives too. But yeah, this is an interesting story of twins, again, of twins that get born kind of out of order, in that this guy was supposed to be born first. And the other one, was Zerah, right? He was the one who was supposed to come out first. Afterward, his brother came out, on whose hand was the crimson thread. His name was Zerach. And see the note? Zerach means brightness, maybe alluding to the crimson, to the color. We don't really know, but it seems like maybe it had to do with brightness. Well, since Peretz actually emerged, he gets to be the oldest son. He gets to be the inheritor, the primogeniture. He's the beneficiary, but he shouldn't have been. So this is another story of a son that was born kind of out of order. So Jacob has grandsons, Peretz and Zerach, that are also twins, just like Jacob was a twin. So are these two guys. So it definitely runs in the family. There is a predisposition into this. So this story is the story. That's the end of the story. So I want to tell you, Doreen, I told you we were going to get to it was only verse 26 that you asked that question. What happened?
Sorry.
But no, I was going to tell you, there's not a lot. So the story is 30 verses, and the last four are the actual important story. Like, I don't mean important. They're not important in the sense that, I mean, they're the part that we got to get to, which is that this is Judah's descendants. These are our ancestors. So Peretz and Zerah are our ancestors. These are the people that every Jew is descendant from, that King David is descendant from, that Jesus is descendant from, that the Messiah is descendant from. This story is the story of the tribe of the kings. It's the tribe that was, to some extent, the only large group of the 12 tribes that survived. The Levites survived, but the numbers of the tribe of Judah, let's look at it this way. If there were Levites scattered around every tribe, right? Then the Levites that survived that were living in the tribe of Judah and in the tribe of Benjamin and around Jerusalem, the only Levites that would have survived were a fraction of how many Levites there were before the destruction of the northern kingdom. So there were other Levites, assumedly, that were taken in exile that died. Most of the tribe of Judah survived. Most of the tribe of Judah either went into exile and got taken to Babylonia or stayed behind, and only the leaders of Judah got taken in exile. But we're called Jews because we're descendants of Judah, because the place that we came back to after the Persian Empire let us come back was called Judea. That was our homeland. So this is our ancestors. These are our ancestors. So this weird story of how we became the tribe that we are, this is our story. I mean,
We're lucky it happened.
yeah. And when we talk about it, this has to be a miracle
Yeah.
to some extent. And what's weird about this story is that it's not the only story about Judah's existence that we literally have to go, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But it is the story that if this hadn't happened, these are the first Jews. I mean, these are the first Judites. If Peretz and Zerach aren't born, then
We wouldn't be here.
we're not here. So the other stories of the tribe of Judah are crazy. What? He's still here because he's a Levite. Yeah. Somehow I think that we needed to have the Judites in order to have the Levites have a place to live.
All came from a tramp.
Yeah. Well, not a tramp, a very clever woman
But she
who
was intelligent, yes.
figured out how to
I
use.
didn't come from her.
Yes, you did.
No, I'm.
He's a Levite,
So
but
am I.
you're
You
probably
didn't come from
you're
her.
probably you're probably
How to parent a people.
He wasn't too good either.
you're
He
probably
figured out
yeah, you're
how to
part
be a parent.
you're probably part Judite too. All you Levites don't think you're so. Yeah, and your ancestor killed the people of Shechem.
Exactly.
So I went on a murderous rampage.
Yeah, I
That was
don't
4 chapters ago. Did you already forget? That was a murderous guy, killed a bunch of people while they were recovering from their bris.
Yeah, we
So
talked about
that is the Levite. But
Right.
what's interesting here, of course, is this isn't the end for the tribe of Judah, because we know later on the story of Ruth. And the story of Ruth, who ends up being King David's great grandmother, which means she's one of our ancestors too. Another non-Israelite, right? Ruth is a Moabite, and she figures out a way to get married to Boaz, and then she becomes King David's great grandmother. So there's no King David without Ruth, which means
Right.
this woman, Ruth, is also this woman who helped save our tribe and who helped make us the great leaders and King David and those kind of people. And then later on, you have another woman named Bathsheba or Bathsheba, who's the mother of King Solomon, who uses her brains to make sure that her son can be king one day. And if you want to read that story, you have to come on Tuesdays. But that story we're going to be in a few weeks. We're going to be getting to that story. I do want to show you one more thing before we wrap up, which is that, and you should come on Tuesday so you can read this story, because it's not that far away. It's not that far away, folks, is this story. And by the way, you can watch it. We'd much rather have you with us, but you can watch it on tape because we're going to get to it real soon, right? Because we're in the book of Samuel right now. We're about to start.
That's a great class.
Yeah, and we're about to start 2 Samuel in a sec, which was when we start reading about King David. And King David's about to become king. But right about here, David has hold it one second. Right about here, David has a daughter and son. Whoa. And here we go. A little further up here, I went too far. Here we are. because I can't see. We have this wonderful story of a woman whose name is Tamar. And interesting about this young woman, Tamar, who's King David's daughter, it says right here, Absalom, son of David, had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, became infatuated with her. And he was so distraught because of his half sister that he became sick, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. And so then he has a friend named Yonadav, another part of the family. He's a cousin, another very fancy way of saying son of David's brother, Shema. Is another way of saying that that's Amnon's cousin. He said to his cousin, I'm in love with Tamar, the sister of my brother Absalom, who also is your half sister. Weirdo. You're a little weird about that. But he says to him, lie down in your bed and pretend that you're sick. And when your father comes to you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare food in the front of me so that I may look on her. Let her serve it to me. And Amnon laid it down and pretended to be sick. The king came to her and said, let my sister Tamar, what do you need? He says, let my sister Tamar come and prepare a couple of cakes in front of me and let her bring them to me. So David said to Tamar, please go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food. There's the food. We always have that in the stories too. Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was in bed. She took dough and kneaded it in cakes in front of him and cooked the cakes. She put the cakes out, but Amnon refused to eat and ordered everyone to withdraw. Everyone had withdrawn. Amnon said to Tamar, bring me the food and feed me, right? Tamar took the cakes. She brought them to her brother. But when she served them to him, he caught hold of her and she said, come lie with me, sister. He called her sister right there, by the way. But she said, don't, brother, don't force me. Such things are not done in Israel. Don't do such a vile thing. Where will I carry my shame? And you will be like any of the scoundrels in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not refuse me to you. But he would not listen to her. He overpowered her, and he lay with her by force. Some of the same stories we've seen in the last few weeks, laying with by force. Can't teach this in Hebrew school. Never teach this in Hebrew school. Amnon felt a very great loathing for her. Indeed, his loathing for her was greater than the passion he had felt for her. And Amnon said to her, get out.
Son of a gun.
What do you think of that, Doreen?
I think it's awful.
And you know what? It's very, very believable.
Yes.
And I believe this.
That to me is.
I believe this story happened.
Absolutely.
I do too, because he's discussed it with
Himself.
Yeah, so he makes.
She
perfect
pleaded
sense.
with him and said, please don't commit this wrong. To send me away would be even worse than the first wrong you committed against me. But he would not listen to her. He summoned his young attendant and said, get that woman out of my presence and bar the door behind her. And she was wearing an ornamented tunic, for maiden princesses were commonly dressed in such garments. His attendant took her outside and barred the door after her. She was wearing the ketonet pasim, the coat of many colors.
Wow.
The word only appears in two places in the Bible, Genesis chapter 37 and 2 Samuel chapter 13. It only appears in two places. Once, twice. Can't be a coincidence.
Yeah, so beware when somebody gives you a coat of many colors.
Huh? Tamar put dust on her head and tore the coat. It's exactly what happens to the coat. Joseph's coat got torn. And she put her hands on her head and she walked away screaming loudly as she went.
You know what?
Absalom said to her, was it your brother Amnon who did this to you? For the present, sister, keep quiet about it. He is your brother. Don't brood over the matter. And Tamar remained in her brother's house for long. Absalom. Similar situation. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything.
But
Kind of
so
what
different
happens.
from Dina, who
Exactly.
doesn't even have a voice, and yet here you have Tamar like screaming. It's very powerful.
She does react. Yep.
Yeah.
Notice from that story the similar idea of, let's think about this for a second. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. We'll take care of this.
And she did have a place to live, which was nice.
With her
clean
brother.
clothes and
And guess what happened? Guess what Absalom did?
he raped her too.
No, don't say he raped her. Come on, that's a
No, I
horrible.
know he killed Absalom.
He killed
No,
Amnon.
Come on,
Amnon.
Tuesday, you'll find out.
Yeah, I know, I remember reading the story that he killed Amnon.
But
But
Absalom.
doesn't he goes to his father first and asks his dad to take care of it,
Yeah.
and he
Well,
doesn't.
I want to just point out one thing, because before you go, well, whatever, so it's a little coincidence. There's a coat of many colors and blah, blah,
No,
blah.
there's always.
There's a name of Tamar, blah, blah, blah. 2 years later, when Absalom was out having his flock sheared.
Shearing again.
Hello?
Surely did.
Come on. They're out shearing the flocks. It's the same thing that happened in Genesis 38. The same time. There's a coat, there's shearing of goats. Let's bide our time. Shearing goats, shearing kids, shearing the flocks.
Yeah.
Whatever. They're shearing the flocks. You could shear goats too. And so he says to him,
I think you're wrong then.
no, shear goats. I'm 100%. They use goat hair. I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
I'm not making it up. It's not my choice. They have long, I think, oh, wait a second, before everybody goes crazy on me.
Yeah,
I think, somebody back me up on this. I think one of those things that are really valuable kinds of, they're actually goats and not sheep.
Ibex?
No, that people,
Shearlings?
no. Angora.
I'm good, yeah.
I think Angora is a goat.
Didn't know.
I think it is. I'm gonna look it up. Anyways, so Absalom, they killed him. But yes, if you want to be there for the whole story. But I wanted you to see these themes that are in the Bible, and they're in these stories that match up with Genesis and Samuel. And it just so happens that we're reading both around the same time. So it's really cool that I did not intend this to happen. I really didn't think that we'd be in Genesis around this Genesis chapter 30s when we were there. I had no idea where we'd be when we started the Tuesdays. I had no idea where we'd be with Tuesdays by this point. I could not have planned it any better, because I had no idea that I had no idea. So I needed to look this up because nobody will.
You look up about the goats.
I believe you.
I'm going to make sure that all of you know that Angora is actually a goat. So it's a goat. It's a goat.
What's the name of the goat? There's many different kinds of goats.
It's an Angora goat.
Thank
I'm going to show you. I'm going to there's the goat, man. It's the Angora goat. I'm not kidding. I didn't make this up. So those are Angoras, and so you can shear a goat. I just want to tell you that these stories are like, they're not a coincidence.
I know.
When you read them together, you realize that somebody is playing, not a joke. It's somebody is playing a game with us to make sure that we know that the stuff that happened in King David's time, to some extent, it has a bigger moral relevance than just a family. I mean, look, you could say, well, it's a coincidence, but it wouldn't have been there. I mean, like, these things were not there. The coat of many colors, the ornamented tunic, would not be only two places. The fact that these things, the names, the fact that Bathsheba and Tamar, these women, these names come up only in around King David, it's not a coincidence. And so what I think, so why? And so the answer that I would give is that people during King David's time wanted to make sure that people knew that these were important stories, that they had there was moral consequences to this. If Tamar doesn't do what she does, Jewish people don't exist.
Which tomorrow?
Well, look, the reality is we didn't talk about it, but since you said it, the fact that Absalom kills Amnon creates a civil war. I mean, thousands of Jews die because of this rape that took place. Not Canaanites, like in Shechem, we made the point that they became Jewish when they got killed, but you made that point, right, Doreen, that the Canaanites they're now Jewish from the time they got circumcised. But these are not people that lived thousands of years before, or in this case, the time of Genesis to the time of King David, which is maybe 1,000 years, right? Over 1,000 years. We are talking about people during King David's time, including King David's own family, including his friends, that are killed in a civil war. So these have real consequences. These relationships, it's not just a matter of morality, it's a matter of the consequences and how this plays out in politics and in history. People are going to die over this. And so,
and it also affected every one of us genetically, who was killed and who lived, who survived to pass on their genetic structure.
And if you think about it, though, we're recognizing by telling these stories that we're not perfect people, right? We're not trying to paint a
We haven't claimed to be from the beginning.
That's the big thing about, the whole Bible, the whole Torah, that we are not perfect people.
Yeah. And when you look at what these people do, and you say that we're replaying this stuff, that we're reliving this to some extent, you're saying that, look, human beings we're bound by emotions, we're bound by passions, we're bound by frailty, we're bound by weaknesses, and
we make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. And so when we say that, look,
I do.
Even you do.
Oh, what a fun.
Even you do. I will tell you that
Not Fanny though.
my friends, not Mike, because Mike never would have done these things.
No.
But my friends, we have to acknowledge the fact that Jerry Springer's Jewish.
I know.
So that was a Jew that did that. So don't tell me
Right.
that we're smart guys.
Come on.
That's just
We have to
downright
look at the
evil,
fact that
right?
He's a Jew.
That's just evil.
He was.
That's just evilness. But Springer stuff is just stupidity.
Stupid.
Just stupid. I mean, that's got to be one of those.
Politicians are though.
Yeah, but that's really, really stupid. Anyways, so yeah, the
Apparently twice, two checks, not just one.
You're right,
Two
Joyce.
checks.
Maybe he was never.
I don't know. Look, the joke's on everybody else because they voted for him again, and then he went on to earn a lot more money as a TV host than he did.
Yeah.
Than he did doing.
Doing stupid shit.
So who's the joke on? It's on us. Anyways, folks, yeah, if that's not a plug for joining us on Tuesday, I don't know what is, because we're actually going to read about what happens when King David becomes king, which is one of the more violent parts of the Bible. When David becomes king, and then as we kind of talked about, when Solomon, his son, becomes king, there's a whole lot of bloodletting.
Yeah.
It is pretty real. I mean, it's pretty much, you could say it's what happened in those days. That's why we got to make sure we don't go backwards.
Hitler would happen again, and here's Putin.
Yeah, well, we have to make sure that those kind of things don't happen.
It's just like Hitler, and they're letting it happen.
Well, that's why we can't let tyrants win.
Well, I hope
Right.
it's not soon. Too many people have died, bombing churches and bombing hospitals with women giving labor and killing them.
Listen, guys, we also have to make sure we don't go backwards, right? There's a reason why we stopped having dynasties and having families. Only certain families could become kings.
At one point, Putin made himself life for life.
He's till 2036, but he's not quite life, but
He'll be
he might be dead. Yes. Well,
like 68, 69 years old.
yeah, but 2036 is it's only 14 years from now. It's still be, I don't know. He timed it out, whatever. Let's hope he doesn't last that long. All right, folks. In the meantime, we'll be here Friday night for services. Wendy will be here. And then the week after, we have Rebbe Soul's going to be here on the 8th. And then before you know it, it'll be Passover. So I was just talking to somebody about Passover, and we're getting ready. So, all right, everybody. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. And thank you, everybody who is joining us on Facebook too.
Thank you, Rabbi. This was
Thank you,
a
Rabbi.
fascinating lesson. I
Yes,
loved
it
it.
was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fascinating.
Bye, guys.
Good night, Cheryl. Good night, Rabbi.
Good night, Joyce.
Good night, John.
Good night, John
Say
Boy.
hi to Glory.
Night, Joyce.
Bye.